Thanks for the nice introduction. I will add a little bit, but I think that pretty much does it. Been in Japan for a very long time, and as Akeme mentioned, my specialty is Japanese gardens. Let me. This I've been doing. It doesn't show up well. Anyway, my specialty is Japanese gardens, but I travel around Japan a lot in search of these places, and uh, for about 20 years, I've been going back and forth between the main island of Japan to Shikoku, and uh, I started doing the pilgrimage about 15 or 20 years ago, and I've been back about 7 or 8 times. And last year, I was finally able to finish all 88 of the temples, uh, especially after the publisher strongly requested that we do a book on this, so it became a deadline. But I was happy to do it because I like walking around out in the countryside in Japan, and I tend to find people in Shikoku friendly and open and very hospitable towards outsiders, something that is not that common in the countryside in Japan. But Shikoku has a long tradition of doing that. And so I was happy to embark on this major project. Plus, I needed something to keep my mind off the elections. Anyway, I'm going to launch into it, and there will be lots of questions at the end about details, historical facts, and I'm just a photographer, and I am aware of some of the details of each temple, but I'm not that well versed in all of the historical facts and information. And Jeff is the person who will know that much better than I have. And he's done the pilgrimage as well, I think more often than I have, even though he lives in Sacramento. um, so please save your questions, and I think you can text them, and he will field the questions at the end of the last part of our presentation. So the trail is about 1,200 kilometers and usually takes about 6 weeks. That's what people earmark for this trip if they do it all in one shot. Nowadays, a lot of people do it in bits and pieces, like I did. They tackle it one prefecture at a time. There's four prefectures in Shikoku, and some people will just devote a week or two into one or two prefectures, and then come back home and go about their daily lives, and then come back whenever they are free to do so. The best times to do it tends to be April and May, or October, November, autumn and springtime. Winters in Japan can be pretty brutal, and so can the summer. So spring and autumn are the most popular times, and that's when you will see most people out and about doing the pilgrimage. Even though it takes about 6 weeks, I always recommend to people to take their sweet time about it. And it's not a marathon, and it's not like that awful TV travel show where people are rushing from one place to the next to get as many stamps as possible and then off to the next destination. To me, that's not travel, and that's not adventure, and it's not the way to approach it. I think it's best to take it slowly and smell the roses along the way. And because there's a lot of cool stuff in Shikoku to visit, not just temples and not just mingling with other pilgrims and all that. There's a lot of lovely things to see and do in Shikoku. And so I always recommend to people that if they're going to go down there and do the pilgrimage, to take their time and enjoy it while they're doing it rather than rushing around. The motivations for doing it is very, very diverse. Some people do it uh, as a kind of lifelong dream. Some people approach it as kind of a hiking expedition or outdoorsy event, adventure. Some people, you think of it as a kind of rite of passage or a change in lifestyle, like a new job or the end of a chapter in their life. But there are so many different reasons for doing it that it's hard to pinpoint one specific reason. Originally, it was a kind of religious pilgrimage, and it still is. And even though most Japanese don't consider themselves particularly religious, a lot of people at the end of it tend to have found some kind of epiphany or awakening of some kind, whether religious or not. But that's bound to happen on any adventure. A person is going to learn something, and whether it's a big deal of a religious experience or just simply some kind of personal awakening, then that's up to the pilgrim to decide, I feel. So I'm going to start in on the slideshow, and I think that illustrates what I'm talking about better than what I have to say. Does that show up, Akime?
I'm not seeing the presentation yet.
All right. I have to do something again. Uh-oh. I pressed play, but...
You have to share the screen again.
Okay. Yeah, here we go. All right. Thank you. Got it?
Yes, looks
Okay.
good.
All right. So first of all, here's the front cover. It was very difficult to get pictures of actual pilgrims last year because of the pandemic. There weren't many people out on the trail. But a friend of mine down there, she's kind of a local guide, and she's very knowledgeable about everything. And she was very kind to take me to lots of the temples and put on her gear and become the cover girl for the book, and also interview in the middle of the book. We wanted to punctuate the book without it just being temple, and we punctuated the book with 4 different interviews with different pilgrims, 2 Japanese and 2 foreigners. And she very kindly posed for the front cover because it was hard to get pictures of actual pilgrims while I was down there. Before I go on, I should mention that the book is available starting today. So really today, and this presentation is the official launch of the book in the US and North America. It is, a lot of people have squeamish feelings about Amazon as a big corporation and prefer to buy things at local brick and mortar bookstores. And I did a quick search this morning to see what's available in the Bay Area, and I found that East Bay Books, East Bay Booksellers, I think in Oakland, and also in San Francisco, Green Apple on Clement Street, and Books Inc. They have various branches all over the place: Oakland, Alameda, Palo Alto, and San Francisco. But for the sake of easiness, Amazon has it's either via my author page or the Amazon US link, which is showing on your screen. If you're outside the US, I recommend Book Depository, and those are the direct links. Okay, so Akime has already introduced me, and I've already mentioned my friend Masako, who posed for the front cover. And the guy who started it all is Kobodaishi, and he's pictured on the left here. The person on the right is Gyoki, who predates Kobodaishi, and Kobodaishi gets credit for most of the Shikoku Pilgrimage because he established most of the temples down there, and he is seen in Japan as some kind of a folk hero because he popularized education for the masses and learning to read and write, and established a school for commoners in Kyoto in his early days. So he's a big name in Japan, and people try to take credit for Kobodaishi visiting everywhere in Japan, even places he never really actually went, and lots of miracles attributed to him. And when people go on the pilgrimage, they always say that they walk with Kobodaishi, and on the vests and that pilgrims wear, it says "I walk with Kobodaishi," and on the hats. So that's very much part of the ritual. Shown here is so-called. For me, this is the most important part of the pilgrimage, is so-called osatai. Osatai means charitable giving, and local community groups, individuals, kids along the way will help you along the pilgrimage by giving you water, coffee, snacks, even cash. And this kind of giving and charitable giving and kindliness is a big part of the Shikoku pilgrimage. For me, anyway, it's the main thing. In recent years, I've kind of lost a bit of faith in humanity, and the concept of and the custom of osatai revived a lot of that for me in the past few years. So it's a beautiful thing that's very much part of the Shikoku culture. This took place at Shidoji Temple, temple number 86, and it was a beautiful thing. Osatai isn't only about giving people money and coffee and drinks, but it also involves people maintaining the trails. Local community groups will maintain the trails. These so-called pilgrim huts or henro huts are along the trail. They're meant to be used only for resting, not for camping out in. Some people do camp out in them, but it's very much frowned upon by the locals. Unless you're in a pinch, then it might be okay if you ask the local police box or the local neighbors if it's okay if it's pouring rain or you can't find a place to stay. But it's best to arrange a real place to stay or a temple stay rather than crash in these huts. But they are along the way for you to have a little rest or a little nap, or just a place to take shelter during your walk. There will be some temples are far from each other, and a person needs to rest every so often. Another sense of the community spirit is people maintaining the trails, putting up signs. They're almost always in Japanese, but it's pretty evident which direction you're supposed to go to go from temple one to the next, from one temple to the next. And these are usually maintained only by local community groups and pilgrim groups. Unlike the Compostela Santiago in Spain, which is subsidized by the government, and it's UNESCO. The Shikoku Pilgrimage is maintained only by volunteers and community groups. It's being shortlisted, I think, for UNESCO, but it's still not there yet. So they don't receive any subsidies. It's all out of local people's pocketbooks. So to my mind, this is part of the Osatai custom of charitable giving and helping out others and travelers in need. As I mentioned, there are lots of different types of pilgrims out on the road, both foreigners and Japanese, and their motivations for going on the trail are as varied as the people themselves. And we divided up the book into various sections, and I'll talk about that more when we get to the first section. Part of the experience is staying in a temple. Not all temples offer temple lodging, but some do. And the rare temple will offer vegetarian temple cuisine, shojin diori. It's a little bit rare in Shikoku itself, but very much part of the very end of the trail, which is actually not in Shikoku, but in Koyasan. And all the temples there offer vegetarian temple cuisine, which is quite honestly beautiful, but not very filling, or a lot of people have to have an extra snack plan after having it. But it's a beautiful thing, and it's very healthy. And as you can see, this is from from Echo-in in Koyasan. We'll talk about Koyasan at the very end. And if you're lucky enough to get a reservation at one of the temple stays, you'll be either sharing a room or having a slightly more expensive private room in a temple, which is normally a tatami room, fairly drafty. But people get up quite early in the morning, and there will be rituals to perform and all that. But it's a great experience, and not only in Shikoku can you stay in temples. Lots of Kyoto's temples offer this. Okay, the main thing to wear really is the white vest. Some people will have a pilgrim hat and the sash and staff or a cane to help them along difficult trails. But the main thing to have really is the vest, because that identifies you to other pilgrims, so people know your purpose, and also to locals who will very happily and gladly help you along your way, and sometimes offer you water and things like that. And so the main thing to get is the vest if a person goes on the trail. And they're available at a few temples. You can buy this sort of stuff, but especially at temple number 1. But you can even order them on Amazon. Amazon Japan even sells this stuff. That's where I got mine. But temple number 1 has 2 or 3 big stores around there with guidebooks and everything. Oh, the protocol. A lot of foreigners are confused by what do they do once they get to each temple, and myself, that's sort of included. But the main protocol really to remember is to bow. Bow 1 time at the main gate. Wash your hands in the water basin. I'll go back to the water basin picture. And then you ring the bell tower once, and then you put in a name slip into, these are name slips or osame fuda, and you put those into the box in the main hall and the daishi hall. And these name slips you put, they're like a calling card. You can see mine here. I wrote it in, and people put those in the boxes, but also they give them to people who have given you osatai, if people have given you money or a place to stay or a ride or cash or water or whatever, it's the custom to give these to people who have offered you osatai as well as the temples themselves. These are all available at the temple shops around Temple One. And then finally, the book seal. Each temple will have a temple seal calligraphy person. Sometimes if it's a small temple, it'll just be the chief monk, and they will sign your and stamp your pilgrim book. And these, it's a 300 yen for almost all the temples are free to enter, but you have to pay 300 yen for each stamp. But they become collector's items for each pilgrim and kind of precious items. Some people are even request that they be buried with their precious temple book. So it's a very nice keepsake to keep for the rest of your life as a memory of your trip. As I mentioned before, I strongly recommend that people take their time in doing the pilgrimage because Shikoku has a lot to offer. Okay, the first prefecture is Tokushima Prefecture, and it's famous for the Awa Odori dance in Tokushima City, but this dance is spread all over Japan, but its main place is Tokushima. And the last couple of summers, I think the main event has been canceled because of COVID, but hopefully next summer it'll be back strong. Everybody's worried about what's going to happen this winter. And there's lots of interesting stuff in Tokushima. There's which I go into more detail and more photos within the book itself, but I'm putting the more dramatic pictures up here. The Negoro Scarecrow village way up in the Iya Valley. Iya Valley is famous for its exotic bridges that are made out of vines, the vine bridges, but the Scarecrow villages. And in any case, each prefecture has a lot of things to offer. Temple number one, Ryozanji, this is where a person will often get their pilgrim goods, their vests and staffs and hats and stamp books. And it has a lovely pond garden and lots of action here, partly because it's temple number one where lots of people start their journey, but also really most pilgrims don't feel like they've done all the entire pilgrimage until they've come back to temple number one. So there are people coming and going literally, and they're ending up their trip or they're starting it off there. But finally, the people don't really, serious pilgrims don't feel like they've done the whole thing unless they've gone all the way to Koyasan, which is actually it's not even in Shikoku, and we will talk about that at the very end. Ryozanji is beautiful in many ways, and lots of temple action and pilgrim action because it's the very first one, and lovely array of lanterns inside. You will notice that for me, if a temple doesn't have an impressive garden or interesting architecture, usually I don't give it too much attention, but some of them have full page spreads in the book because it has an impressive garden or impressive architecture or something special about it. And it has to be said that all the temples don't really match up to some of the other ones. So this is one of the more impressive temple gardens and pond gardens. But it's not only about the gardens. Jizoji, temple number 5, has an impressive array of rakan or Buddhist disciples. It so much so that Jizoji is the name of the temple, but the locals call it Rakenji because these disciples are Raken, so they call it disciple temple. So this is impressive for a different reason than just gardens. They all have something special about them, but not all of it can be photographed, and sometimes it's not so evident what's the special thing at each temple, because sometimes it's just a historical footnote or things like that. It's not something that's visual, and that's why in this presentation I'm only showing the ones that are somehow impressive visually. The book has all 88 of them, just for the sake of completion. Shosanji is temple number 12. This is one of the difficult temples to reach. And as a rule of thumb, I found that the more difficult the temple to reach, the more impressive it could be. Temple number 22, Byodoji, I was taken by the ceiling fresco and the paintings and the ceiling. But the architecture there is quite splendid. Tokushima is where most people start off if they're going to do it according to the original plan. But a lot of people will start off wherever it's closest to their home or airport. The next prefecture is Kochi Prefecture, and Kochi is wild and woolly, but somehow quite impressive. But this is a Moroto Peninsula, very far down south, and it's where Kobayashi reached enlightenment, I believe, and in a little cave down below this cape. Another impressive place to visit is Makino Botanical Garden, which is right next door to Chikarenji, which is one of the more fabulous temples in Kochi Prefecture. So since Makino Botanical Garden and Chikarenji are right next door to each other, it's kind of hard to ignore, and it's definitely worth visiting the Botanical Garden. In fact, I think at one time this compound was all one part of Chikarenji, and they couldn't maintain the whole thing, so it was given over as a botanical garden. In any case, it's right next door. This was one of my very favorites, partly because of its rising vertical garden, Konomineji. It's very difficult to get up there, but it was worth every ounce of effort. Back in Kochi City, this is near Chikarenji, Zenjibuji. It has an impressive Fudo fountain leading up the hill with reflecting Fudo. Shoryuji used to be on a little island just offshore from Kochi City, and nowadays it's connected by a peninsula, but it's still fairly remote enough to feel isolated and extremely rural. I enjoyed my day out there. People were very friendly to me. Kongo Fukuji, it took me 5 trips to Shikoku to finally get down here. And it was well worth the effort, but it was very, very difficult to get down there. The roads are extremely narrow, and this peninsula, what's the name of that peninsula? It'll come to me later. It's seen in Japan as a kind of bellwether for typhoons and hurricanes, because it's right at the very tip of Kochi Prefecture, sticking out into the ocean. Very impressive scenery. Sorry?
Cape Ashizuri.
Ashizuri. Ashizuri is hard to get to, but it's worth the effort. And it took me 5 trips to Shikoku to finally make it down there. All right. Also in Kochi, sort of ending up Kochi, is in Koji, also with an impressive pond garden with carp. Ehime is the next prefecture, and it's famous for oranges and oranges. A lot of the oranges in Japan come from Ehime. It's Kochi and Ehime are famous for their citrus products, and the main city there, Matsuyama, is famous also for its hot spring Dogo Onsen. There's a novel written there. What was the name of it? It'll come to me later. And it's funky little streetcars. This is where I first fell in love with Shikoku. My original interest in Shikoku Island was The Inland Sea, which is a famous novel, travel book written by Donald Ritchie, in which Donald Ritchie spent most of his adult life in Tokyo, surrounded by large buildings in Tokyo. And one day he just decides he's fed up with it all, and he goes down to the inland sea, to these little islands. The inland sea is surrounded by Shikoku and Honshu, and for many years, and even now, it's a main shipping transportation link for Japan. But there's hundreds of little islands in there, most of them nowadays uninhabited, and they're sleepy little fishing villages, and he was charmed by it all. And that was my first trip down to Shikoku for doing a magazine article on that. And I fell in love with the place because of the clunky streetcars. And going back to Hiroshima, I stopped up at the I arrived at the ferry port about an hour and a half early, so I went in for some noodles. And when I went into the noodle shop, everybody was laid out on the tatami mats and on the counter, all asleep. Everybody was having a siesta. And I decided then and there, I like these people. I like this place. People take naps, which people in Tokyo don't do. They're too busy. And down in Shikoku, people are much more laid back and sleepy and rested and slow. And I like that. So that was the beginning of my love affair with Shikoku. I barely even knew about the Shikoku Pilgrimage in those days, but I soon learned about it. So anyway, that's my history with Shikoku. And I've been in love with the place ever since. Anyway, Matsuyama has a lot to offer, not just hot springs and oranges, but Iwayaji, this is one of the more difficult ones to reach, and it has little cave perches up here, which were, ideal places for meditation. Some people still crawl up there to meditate. Next door or nearby is Joruiji, which has this massive lotus pond. And I was just lucky enough to find a lady admiring her lotuses. Temple 51, Ishitaiji, is a major temple back in Matsuyama City. Even the streetcar goes nearby, and it's a massive compound with gardens, pagoda, all kinds of buildings, and a museum. It's lots of activity there. If some people who don't do the whole trail, at least they will go to Ishitaiji, because it's such an important temple in that part of the world. Outside of Matsuyama is Temple 52 Taisanji, which has an impressive heaven and hell mural inside the gate, which is, I think this is the hell part, heaven part. I think the hell is on the right. Mayagamiji, this Japanese think this has more shrine architecture than Buddhist temple architecture. I was impressed by the long corridors leading up to it. I'm not sure if that's what people think makes it look like a shrine or not, but I was impressed by the corridors and the greenery. And Penji is another one that's very difficult to reach, but I was impressed by the grounds and the architecture and the scenery up there. But again, it was a real bear to get up there. Kagawa Prefecture. This is Angel Road, which is actually not on Shikoku. It's on one of the offshore islands on Shodoshima. These offshore islands off the coast of Shikoku, particularly Kagawa, in recent years has become kind of an art fair. The what's the name of it? It'll come to me. The Triennial. It's a worldwide art fair, and it still is an effort to give jobs to people on these tiny islands, because they've been suffering from urban flight. There's no jobs out there in these little islands, so it encourages people to open little Airbnbs or cafes or noodle shops and keep young people back or get younger people to move back on the islands. And they do this every 3 years with this big art event on these little islands all around Kagawa Prefecture. But it's even if the art event triennial is not going on, it's still a treat to go out on these little ferry boats to these islands, because it's very much part of the inland sea and the Kagawa Takamatsu experience. Takamatsu city is probably the most developed place in Shikoku, and it has a famous in Japan garden, Ritsurin, which there are 3 main gardens in Japan. There are actually thousands of gardens in Japan, but the 3 main gardens are in various parts of Japan and of various types of quality. Only one of them is particularly impressive to my eye. Ritsurin, though, is usually the people's choice, even though it's not one of the top 3. It almost every year people consider it to be voted in as the people's choice, because it's extremely impressive, and that's one of the main highlights of Takamatsu. Even the street code goes by there. Also in Kagawa is Jinain. Jinain has this impressive vertical garden behind it, and nobody ever goes back there. I was the only one who even bothered to notice it, but I was most impressed. Right next door is Kanonji, with this huge tree and exotic root of tree. Right next, Jinain and Kanonji are in the same compound, so pilgrims can tick off Temple 68 and 69 all in the same shot. 68 and 69. Let's see, this was 71, Iadanji. This is another mountain temple. It's hard to reach, very vertical climbing to get up there. Temple 75. This Zensuji is pretty much the headquarters for the entire thing, because this is Kobodaishi's birthplace. And Zensuji has sort of a temple stay hotel, a large cafeteria for pilgrims. I think there are offices for the pilgrimage. It's a very important temple on the pilgrimage, and very much a must-see in Zensuji. Nearby is Goshoji with an impressive pond garden. Shiromaneji was impressive to me because of its vertical rock garden on the right side of the temple. Shidoji was probably my second favorite, partly because of its dry garden behind the temple that nobody was visiting except for myself and my partner. And also I have fond memories of it because that's where the big Osatai event was taking place with free snacks, oranges, coffee, and water. And so that was my first taste of Osatai in Shikoku. So I have fond memories of it. I know other pilgrims who've been there who weren't impressed at all with Shidoji, but I don't think that they visited the garden and back or had free coffee in the forecourt. So I think every pilgrim has different experiences at different temples, and therefore their favorites and less favorite ones. And so probably I should mention that, for me, this is impressive because I have my own personal memories associated with it, but other people may not be. And the same goes for temples that I have not highlighted. Some people may have warm memories of a particular temple that I sort of only devoted a quarter of a page to, but my apologies there. But we all have our own preferences, and this was mine because my own personal experience was moved by the people's kindness at this temple. So, and Temple 88, this is the end of the trail, really, is Okuboji, way up in the hills, but impressive in its own way. But as I said, people don't really feel like they've done the complete pilgrimage unless they've been back to temple number 1, Ryozanji. And even more so, people don't feel like they've done the complete pilgrimage until they've been to Koyasan, which is in Wakayama Prefecture, which is not even in Shikoku, but closer to Osaka. Koyasan is a hilly Buddhist village of monasteries. I think there's about 30 or 40 monasteries up there. And many of them offer temple lodging and temple cuisine and the full Buddhist experience. And that is also the burial place of Kobodaishi at Okunoin Cemetery. I've been told that they have the place is lit up at night because of Kobodaishi's graveyard is lit up with candles and perpetually, but there are light ups in the vicinity to guide people all the way to his gravesite. I have never been out there at night, but the cemetery is very impressive. With important people in Japan have burial sites there, and lots of unusual and interesting burial gravestones in Okunoin Cemetery, most impressive of which is Kobodaishi's himself. And at Koyasan, a lot of the temples will offer various ceremonies. I stayed at Ekoin, which is popular with foreigners because the monks speak English. But they offer a fire ceremony about 5 o'clock in the morning, and people that stay there are welcome to observe the ceremony and participate in it and even photograph it. I find them Ekoin very helpful monks and very friendly. So that's pretty much I'm only showing the highlights of the book and of my experience, but the book, of course, has 2 or 3 times more photos. I'm only showing what we have time for, and the ones that I have anecdotes and favorite stories of each place. As I mentioned, lots of places in the Bay Area are selling the book. I found that in Oakland, East Bay Booksellers, and in San Francisco, Green Apple and Books Inc. So a lot of people prefer brick and mortar type bookstores. My author page is on Amazon, and the Amazon link below is we can't copy and paste, I guess. If you're overseas, I recommend the Book Depository because they include shipping, and I think it's fairly reasonably priced too. It just went on sale on Amazon today, so I'm already seeing competitive offers price-wise. So if you don't mind buying things via Amazon, then go for it. But a lot of big bookstores around the Bay Area are carrying it. And so I'm going to turn things over to Jeff pretty soon, and he will field your question. He and I are going to discuss it. Jeff is much more knowledgeable about it than I am as a professor of Asian history and Japanese, and he's done the pilgrimage a few times, so he knows a lot better than I. So Jeff?
Oh, hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining us today. That was just fantastic, John. I was feeling very natsukashi. I guess nostalgic would be the English word for it. It doesn't really translate as well. So I will be fielding and facilitating some questions. Just a quick introduction to everybody. My name is Jeffrey Dym. I am a professor of Japanese history at Sacramento State. I actually first went on the pilgrimage as a bus pilgrim probably 20 years ago, maybe around the time that John went, and then family and other things got in the way. And then in 2018, I spent 90 days on the pilgrimage. I walked it and took a bus trip and drove it and walked it. So I feel very close to it. There's for people who become addicted to the pilgrimage, they call it pilgrimage sickness. And I have a bit of pilgrimage sickness, and probably the most difficult thing for me for the pandemic has been not being able to get back to Japan and actually get on the pilgrimage. So I am very much looking forward to being on it. And John's book arrived in my house today and is giving me the sense of virtually being there. Though with your presentation today, I was thinking everything brought back so many memories from the Ryozanji garden. I remember I'd spent all day. I arrived at my hotel exhausted. I just wanted to crash, and I was like, oh, I got to go see that garden. So I spent 2 hours in exhaustion, but revitalized by just the beauty of the garden. It's so huge, but it's so beautiful. So I will field questions. So if you do have a question, if you could add them to the chat, that would be great. I had a question for you to start off with, John. How did you do the pilgrimage? Did you walk at all? Did you do the bus? Did you do the car? Did you a little mix of everything?
All of it, mix as much as I could by motorbike. It's a long story, but my Japanese car driving license expired a few years ago, and it's been very difficult for me to get it back. So, but I'm still able to drive motorbikes for some weird reason. But it's hard to rent them, and some of these places are really remote and difficult to get to. So, a lot of people gave me rides on cars, motorbike, buses, walking. Cars, trains, buses, anything available, bicycles.
Wow. So I will say probably about 100,000 of people a year go on the pilgrimage, with the vast majority of people going on bus pilgrimages. And some people go on a bus pilgrimage, which is all at once. So maybe 10 days to cover all the temples. And then other people break it up by going on 1 or 2 days at a time over a year. So maybe they'll go every month for it. And about 1,000 people walk it. And there are people who bike it. And all the ways I wanted to go, I have not thought about going on a motorbike, but that would be a way to get it. There is a question about how long does it take you to, how many days does it take to walk the pilgrimage? It depends on your pacing, but
2 months.
about 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And actually, walking is the most expensive way to go. It's much more expensive than the other means, just because it takes so long, and the lodging and the food and just the daily necessities cost so much money. How heavy was your gear pack? Mine was heavy and got lighter and lighter as I went, and realized I could just get rid of everything that I didn't need. For me, the most difficult thing was food. And I also get cold really easily, so I brought a lot of warm clothes. The problem is, as soon as you start hiking, you get hot. So I would sort of take off my jacket, put it in my bag, get to the temple to offer a prayer, dripping in sweat. But most people's packs are maybe 20, 30 pounds, maybe lighter. I don't know how heavy your pack was, or what you...
Very, because of camera equipment.
Oh.
That's why I had to take transportation, because I'm almost 70 years old, and carrying heavy camera equipment was just practically impossible up some of these hills. So I didn't really have much choice. But I would really rather have done the entire thing on foot, but I'm just not able to do so. But hardcore pilgrims think you haven't really done it unless you've done it on foot. And so I'm kind of intimidated by that.
I will say yes and no. One thing for people to know, no matter how you go, I think the most difficult thing about the pilgrimage is there are so many stairs. So like, if you really want to train for the pilgrimage, it is
stairs.
There's thousands and thousands of, I'm not trying to exact, like, there are lots of, most of the temples, even if you drove there to get to the actual temple,
you still have to.
You have a bunch of chairs. In terms of the pilgrimage, some people say walking is more authentic, but I've discovered that actually for the walkers, the pilgrimage is the space between the temples. And walkers tend to only spend 5 or 10 minutes at a temple.
Yeah.
And for the bus people, it's the temples that are the thing. So they tend to spend more, like a half hour or an hour at the temple. So there's this, what is more authentic? For walkers, they tend to want to be like, say a prayer, offer the money, get to the next place. Whereas the bus people are like, I don't want to get back on the bus. I want to.
Yeah. I hadn't thought of that.
For it. So if anybody does have questions, please do ask for it. How did you pick your route, since you said it was kind of haphazard? You didn't go 1 through 88 is what as I understand.
No. Pretty much depending on the season. And my first trip down there was around Takamatsu. So I tended to we did 4 or 5 of them around Takamatsu, just kind of randomly, whichever ones were closest to a train station that we could walk to from this train station, in no particular order. And that sort of got me started doing it. And I can't remember the second, third, fourth, and all that, but pretty much randomly. I didn't pay too much attention to the order and the number of the temples, but the hardcore pilgrims that I know, they consider the number of the temple more than the name of it. So I felt kind of at odds with that, because as a photographer, I need to know the names and keywords and everything for the sake of stock photography. So I was always asking other pilgrims, what do you mean Temple 31? What's the name of it? And a lot of times they didn't know the name of it. They just identified it by the number.
Yeah, and most of even the highway signs, like Temple 31 and then the name, so that you just catch
as
it
an afterthought.
Because there are some, particularly in Kochi, that are the most difficult to get to. The one on the
really Ashizuri,
but also the one on the where Kobodaishi was in the cave, because it's so far. There's no train, or there's no train that goes down there. So you actually have to. It's very difficult.
Maroto. Well, they're both quite both Moroto and Ashizori are pretty remote spots, but I kind of enjoyed both of them, though I had lots of thrills and spills along the way and little adventures with people. So, um, that always colors a person's adventure, the people that you meet and the things that happen to you along the way. And both places were very difficult to get to, but people helped me get there. So I'm kind of have fond memories of both of them, no matter how difficult they were.
Yeah, the kindness of people to help
Yeah.
one another is really quite incredible.
Yeah.
So a question is, what is the mood both on the trails and in and around the temples? Does it feel commercial? Are the bus tour groups chattering? Is there a fearing of sacrality? I'd say it really isn't all that commercial.
Yeah.
There's
No, not at all.
it's a big difference is when you're walking it, you're kind of isolated because you're alone. Sometimes, there's one stretch of 70 kilometers between temples. So it's just like a trudge of walking and hoping you can find something. There are not that many restaurants along the trail. There are a lot of convenience stores, but there are not a lot of that. The actual pilgrimage on a bus, everyone does it for different reasons. Some people do it annually. Some people are old and kind of widows or widowers, and they want to once a month get together with other people and be friends with people, and they're looking forward to the hotel and having a beer and sitting in the hot tub afterwards. I also noticed a couple times on the bus, like some people would stay quiet the whole time because they were memorializing somebody or something, and then when we finished, they finally talked because they were kind of in this, I am remembering my mom or my dad or my husband, or even like my child. And it became like on the bus, there wasn't much chattering. There's kind of camaraderie, and you have all sorts of different bus people. There's a person who lingers and takes the pictures. There's a person who wants to talk. I'd say there's kind of a friendship. Everyone, it's not a rule, but most people would buy like a treat and share it with everyone on the bus as kind of a friendship for it.
That's about as commercial as it would get.
Yeah, pretty much. I think so. Some of the temples have housing. We are going as a husband and wife team. Are the temples single gender?
No. A lot of them are closed though right now. I'm starting to see people. A lot of the temple stays are just starting to open up. The commercial ones they've always been open. They haven't closed, but the so-called temple stays, a lot of them closed down during the pandemic, but some of them are just starting to open up.
So there are temples you can stay at. They're not all of the temples allow you to stay at it. So it's more like you're staying at inns or hotels and finding places. Most temples are a husband and wife, perfectly fine. On the bus tours, the cheapest bus tour would be like the male. You could have a private room, but it's more expensive because it's a private room, or there'd be like the male room or the female room for a couple. The first time I went on, I stayed in the male room, and it was all very elderly men who were lonely, who wanted to stay up all night talking. And I was like, can you guys please? Like, they were just chatting the evening away with the newfound friends that they found. How far in advance do you reserve lodging? Day before, on the day? That's
day before, I think. Day before.
The day before, except as John said, Japanese winters are cold, the rainy season is wet, and the summer is hot. So most people like to go in September, October, November, March, April, May. And I was walking it, and it was Golden Week, and I ran into trouble. I couldn't find a place. And there was usually a day or two in advance is fine, because that tells you how you can figure out how far you're getting. But there's certain times of year where the trail gets very busy, and I ended up having to the closest place I could find. It required me to take like a train back and forth from where I was staying, because it was hard to book. For the most part, it is easy to book, but there are
Golden weeks to be avoided for any time.
Very much so. You mentioned that it was expensive to walk the entire trail. Can you guesstimate how much it would cost? I was probably spending 120 to 150 a day. Most inns are probably
3,000. The temple stays 3,000 or 4,000 usually.
Depends if you get the meals or didn't get the meals, and then sometimes it was less, but then sometimes it would be a little bit more. I tried to keep it down. I think I averaged maybe 110 a day, and I was trying to be cheap. But then it also gets to, you're in a temple with like great looking little Ohenro goods, and I'm a sucker for.
Okay. Actually, I didn't spend that much myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're spending
a lot less.
A lot less.
A lot less. And so, some of these temple stays are free. They're not very nice. I mean, you're sort of dumped in the back tatami room, but a lot of them have free accommodation. If they have a space, they will let you crash there.
Some will.
I think a lot of that's closed now, but in the good old days.
Yeah, probably like 5,000. You could do it. It becomes a getting to Shikoku is a certain expense.
Yeah.
There's the walking. So most inns, they have a price of just staying or staying with food.
Yeah.
It depends on how you want to do it. I tended to do it with food because I found that there were more hairdressers in the countryside than restaurants. And in walking, it was hard for me to maintain enough food because I'd be
really.
Yeah. I needed to eat.
Yeah.
I have a high metabolism. I was burning up a lot of energy, but it was, the next restaurant is 6 kilometers away. Okay, that's a 90-minute walk.
But now I don't know when was the last time you were down there, but most convenience stores in Japan have pretty good eats nowadays. They put 7-Eleven in the US to shame. In fact, if I need coffee, if there's a Starbucks right next to a 7-Eleven, I will choose 7-Eleven because their coffee is better than Starbucks, and it's 100 yen. And to me, it's a no-brainer. And these convenience stores are, especially during the pandemic, the last thing I want to do is walk into a restaurant. So
actually, that's true.
Going into a convenience store and then getting a little picnic and sitting outside, that's the way to go. So that's how I kept prices down. And some of the free temple stays where you just camp out in the back, or they let you crash in the little back tatami room. But there are free places to stay too. The huts seem to be sacrosanct, though. It's become kind of an issue. Because they don't want a lot of the hiker types, a lot of people approach the pilgrimage like it's some kind of a hiking. I forgot the name of that awful travel show where people are rushing from one destination to the next, but the one I mean. And some people treat it that way, and they want the pilgrimage to be free, and so they'll camp out in odd places. Usually it's foreigners who do this, and it's become kind of a contentious issue. So the local guides asked me very nicely to please make a big deal about that, because the locals are a little bit annoyed by this. So if a person is stuck and they have no choice of a place to stay, it's better if they ask the local police box if they can crash in the Henro hut, or the local neighbors, if that's okay, if they don't mind, because it's raining, or I can't find a place to stay because it's cold a week, and what am I going to do? Even if you can't speak Japanese, at least you can put it on your Google Translate and show the local housewife. It's like, I'm stuck. I'm in a panic. Is it okay if I spend the night in the hut? I can't find a place to stay. But not to just do it because it annoys the locals.
And I'd say that's probably, I mean, many of people I met along the trail, a number had come from Santiago, the Camino,
Yeah.
and just seemed to be like, oh, I want to do another pilgrimage that's like Santiago. And then they come to
Yeah.
Japan, and it's not quite set up in the same way.
No.
So there are temples to stay in. I didn't bring a sleeping bag or pad that was asked, or tent, just because it was extra weight.
Yeah.
It can be done. It can also be how much time do you want to give, and how much time do you have to, in order to sort of keep to my schedule. I like to book in the hotels in advance, and some I wasn't going to negotiate all the, can I stay in your temple?
And it also depends on if a person can speak Japanese or not.
That's true. Yes.
And that would be, I mean, it's possible to do it if you don't, but I think it would help a lot if a person does.
So there are a number of inns that do kind of advertise to foreigners, and there's some that have like hostels that have emerged just for foreigners. I will say, for me, one reason for trying to stay in many of the inns was there's nothing quite like a Japanese ofuro. After, for me, I was averaging 21 miles a day. So after 8 hours of walking, it was quite relaxing for it.
Sure.
Are there snakes, wild boars, and dangers? I would say there are signs everywhere for snakes in certain prefectures of I can't remember the name of the snake that the Japanese are terrified of. I did run into wild boars twice.
Yeah.
And one was a little scary because it was closer than I expected. If you are thinking of walking it, I would say it is not, and a number of foreigners complain, it's the mamushi, that's correct. A third of the pilgrimage walking is beautiful. It's in the woods. To me, there's nothing like walking through a bamboo forest as the bamboo creaks. It's just like, it's
great.
It's so meditative. A third is urban walking, and a third is literally along the highways. So the number one thing walkers complain about is you will go through some tunnels that are over a mile long, literally 5 inches away from semi trucks coming down spewing diesel. And for me, I got into a routine of like putting in my earbuds, cranking up my thing, and just make it through, because the trucks are coming so close to you. It is
scary.
It is really, really scary. So just be aware that part of the walking is incredibly beautiful, but part of it is also you are alongside the highway. And then you also do have a situation of, okay, I could go through this tunnel that's a mile, or I could go around and it's 5 miles, but it would be more beautiful. And then it becomes, right, 5 miles, that's like an hour and a half. What am I going to do for it? It's not to discourage people from walking, but many people complain that it's not like Santiago and beautiful countryside, but it is. Part of it's on the highway.
Some of
that is,
some of it's beautiful.
Much of it is very beautiful. But there's also, it's about a third is how I kind of broke it down. A third really countryside, incredibly beautiful. The temples, well, not all temples, many of the temples are incredible entranceways and walkways. A few would not be visited if they were not on the pilgrimage. Is there fresh water on the trail? I tended to bring I had a water, no, I'm spacing the name of it, a 3-liter bag that I carried with me in my backpack that I would fill up at the hotel or get it at the convenience store. There's no like faucets generally on the road, though there are convenience stores like most everywhere.
Everywhere.
A John-like story is like, things happen on the pilgrimage that you wouldn't normally expect. So I was walking down, I had no food, I hadn't prepared enough food, I was like starving. And some guy in a pickup truck like pulled up beside me and was like, "Hey, how's it going? Like, are you from America?" I was like, "Oh, I don't really want to talk to someone right now. I'm just like trying to get something to eat." He's like, "Meet me down the street." So I met him at a vending machine. He's like, "Here, have a beer." I was like, "I don't want a beer right now." And then he's like, "Oh, I got to go get something to eat." So he like drove off, got like sushi and like this whole lunch of like, he was a savior in this situation. I was kind of dreading like, I have to be sociable. I'm not coming down
Conversation.
Setai, but I don't really want a beer at 2 PM when I still have more to walk. But then it became this great hour-long conversation with a meal provided. And I imagine you had some of those situations
Yeah,
as well
yeah,
when you were
yeah.
traveling.
Yeah,
Was there any in particular that you kind of remember of
that sort of thing. Um, just unexpected. Yeah, not quite that dramatic, but somewhere in AMA, I was walking with a pilgrim from Tokyo, and we were walking from, I don't remember which one to which one, but we were out in the middle of nowhere, and I was really starting to drag. And the woman from Tokyo was also tired because she had started off walking, and she was walking portions of it, but she developed some kind of knee problem, and so she was starting to use trains and buses and a bit of walking, but mostly buses and trains. So she and I were pretty much in the same boat, and but as you probably noticed, the Japanese guidebook is a lot better than the English one for details and community buses, information, and that. And she had that. She had it all mapped out. So she and I hooked up and walked for 3 or 4 different temples together. And we were walking down this little country lane, and this old lady stopped us and gave us a bag of oranges and whipped out her purse and gave us each 1,000 yen. It was so unexpected, and I felt terrible for accepting it. But my friend from Tokyo, she said, and you really should accept it, because it's kind of bad form to refuse, even if your reasons are good. She really wants to do this because she's vicariously walking with Kobodashi, and that's her reason for doing that. So just accept it and give her a name slip and smile, and let's move on. And another thing, it was nice to have some extra water, but it was the last thing I wanted was to carry heavy water. But it's best to accept these things because, like, you don't really want the beer at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but they want to be nice to you, and they want to give you something and be part of your adventure. And it's kind of uncool to reject that. So even if I'm in the mood to be walking, if somebody stops and offered me a ride, I will accept it because of those reasons, and grandma giving me 1,000 yen, and which I didn't really deserve, but she wanted to give it to me, so I accepted it. That was probably the most memorable. But I've had people stop me on the street and give me rides, and stop on the road and hand out a bottle of green tea or water or something, just randomly here or there, wherever I was.
Yeah, I had a number of those situations too.
Yeah.
Of just, I was sitting on the side eating lunch, and an old lady came out, like stopped their car and gave me like a hard candy
Yeah,
out of the window.
that's
And also,
great.
you are supposed to accept everything, but I did have like some guy who came
Yeah.
out of a factory and gave me like 3,000 yen. And I was like, no, I can't. This is way too
Good
much. I
God.
can't take this. And I was like, but it became this like, no,
It-
yes, no,
It's
okay.
embarrassing, yeah.
Yeah.
They want to do it, so
Uh,
yeah. It's kind of a dilemma to what do you do. But yeah, actually in the book I talk about that a little bit because for them, when they all, if they're really serious about that, and if somebody hands you 1,000 yen or goes and runs off and buys you lunch, they've got some sense of what you're doing, and apparently it means that they think that they're vicariously on the pilgrimage with you by helping you along. So it's kind of uncool to refuse it because you're sort of saying, no, you can't be part of my pilgrimage or something. So I always accepted it, whether I needed it or not.
yeah, that's what
And
it
I
is.
imagine, like, if I'm weighed down with water or green tea bottles, and the last thing I want is another half kilo on my backpack, I just leave it in the next hut for the next tenro. People do that. They leave behind stuff in these huts. snacks and oranges and bottles of water. I don't think I ever went to a pilgrim hut that didn't have people's leftovers left behind, jackets and things, water.
So,
No money though.
A couple other questions. I'll field one of the first ones. Are the trails wet and muddy? It depends if you want to walk in the rain or not in the rain. I only took one day off because it was supposed to rain, and then it didn't rain. There was one day where I was in a downpour on a stretch of road with trucks going by just splashing me, and I showed up at this fancy like onsen hotel just like dripping wet. Like, and I came in, I was like, do you guys have I felt bad coming in because I was so wet. For the most part, if you don't go in the rainy season, it's not too bad. I would point out the picture on the cover of John's book. I wore hiking boots, and I actually wore one pair of hiking boots, the soles down, because you are on concrete so much.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you can do everything in sneakers. There's just a few mountain trails where you might want hiking boots, but for the most part, they are.
Soles.
It would be fine.
Yeah.
A question: if I had only 4 days to walk and want to hike through forest and beautiful country, what temples would you recommend?
That's tough.
It is tough. I was trying to remember the names, and I couldn't remember
Yeah.
which one. I can't remember where the bamboo forest is off the top of my head. I did want to say, I think
if I look at the map,
I think 44 and 45 are two of the more.
Yeah.
There's a part you're going down a busy, like kind of a country road, but they are out in the countryside. And then I believe from Temple 60 to 61 is a backcountry road that goes through.
Kagawa. Ehime?
No, it's in Ehime, but there's if you take the trail, you actually hit one of the outside temples. In addition to the main temples, there are also lots and lots of outside temples. And this one actually had a place where you could stand under a waterfall and do the prayer. But no one was around. I wanted to try it, but I was afraid of like the person like, oh, go do it. But I was like, well, what if I I didn't say it, but like if I slip and if foreigner slips in the river and no one's around, what happens? Type of thing. Are there companies that can bring your luggage to your next temple? I wish. I don't know.
Actually, you could taku beam them to the next, but maybe not to the temple, to your next hotel, maybe.
It's not quite. It's not there. There are a few. So I did try to put together a bus tour for May 2020, and that didn't happen for it. But there are a few walking pilgrimages that I think take care of some of that for you.
Luggage.
So that they have a guide walking with you, but they help you carry your luggage for it.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Independently, though, like if you knew your next ryokan or hotel or something, you could always go to 7-Eleven and ship your bag to the next one.
Yeah, it just depends on like how much extra stuff you're carrying. For me, it was always like I'm carrying my jacket, I'm carrying my book, I'm carrying some food, I'm carrying
Water.
my camera. So there were very few things that I didn't have that much extra clothes. It pretty much every business hotel or hotel has a laundry service for a couple of bucks to do the laundry. So that it's you don't have to carry that much extra stuff.
No. Just travel light. Wash along the way. Something wears out, throw it away and get a new one. Get a new t-shirt.
As John says, Japan does have the greatest delivery service. So like when I go from Osaka to Tokyo, instead of taking my bag on the train, I would just ship it for like $30.
Yeah.
You drop it off at a convenience store and they will drop it off at the, at the house of where I'm staying. And I don't have to lug a big, huge suitcase through the train at rush hour. And everyone's like, foreigner, what are you doing with it?
Yeah.
How
Well,
would
I
you
think
express? No.
I think going from temple to temple, though, it's better just to have all your stuff, because Takubin usually is within 24 hours, but not always. If you send it late, it might not arrive the next day, so you're stuck at that place for an extra day waiting for your bag.
Mhm.
So I think better to just travel light.
And usually you carry a bag, sort of like a little bag with at most temples, depending on how much you want to or not want to participate, you offer incense, so you need some incense. You offer candles, so you need some candles. And then depending on what you want to get done, so at each temple, they will stamp your book.
Mm.
And as you go, they keep stamping it. So it gets redder and redder. And in the book, John mentioned some of that's gone up around 150 times. Their stamps are it's all probably just red. You can't probably see anything else.
Mm.
You can also, as seen behind me, get a scroll made, but they are pricey. So the calligraphy for the book is 300 yen. That's standardized across all of them. The places are open 7 to 5 or 8 to 5. I think there's a set time because they're tired of people showing up at 5:30 and going, "Hey, sign my book." So it's like a set time. The scroll is 500 yen each times 88. So that makes it a little bit more expensive. And then the actual mounting is around $1,500 to $2,000 to actually get it put on the silk afterwards. And it takes several weeks to get it done.
Wow.
But it is something that I wanted to get done. It was just much more for me.
Sure.
But then you're also carrying a scroll that's it's fairly wide in your backpack. And then one of my great concerns was when it rains,
Yeah.
how do I keep
Keep protected.
this dry?
And mine got a bit wet, actually.
All convenience stores have delivery services, and all hotels allow you to deliver it. My wife's Japanese, so I have some in-laws in Japan. So as I was making my backpack lighter, I was shipping them stuff. And then at one point I needed something and they knew where I was going to be in 3 days, and they shipped it there, and they're like, "Oh, we were expecting Mr. Foreigner." So but most places are very welcoming for the most part. Some temples have, I think the Byodoji has one of the most welcoming Buddhist monks overseeing it. A few of them have, one place had his wife did the signing and the kid was running around and no one else was there. They're really friendly. And then some other places,
they're grouches.
They're a little bit. They're not quite as friendly.
Every place is so different from each other. And that was another thing. Now that you mention it, because I remember some of them was sort of young, small, friendly family, and other times it's some old grizzly bastard, grudgingly signing or doing the calligraphy.
Yeah, and each temple. I was curious about how much. Maybe the last question, since we're running out of time, about how much time do you spend at each temple? Because some of the temples, they have extra gardens, and they have a cave underneath that you can go into, or there's so much stuff to actually do.
Like Ishitaiji is just vast.
Yep.
It's a lot of it's kind of shabby, but there's so many things in there. You could spend a half a day in there, and other temples, further along the trail or behind it, it's 10 minutes and I'm out of there. There's just nothing to see much, or all the treasures are hidden and not for the public.
I'd say it was a spiritual experience. It was also that was a question. Why did I do it? I did it because I'm a Japanese historian and I wanted to experience history as most of the people experience history that I teach about. So they walk from place to place, and I take the Shinkansen from place to place. And I want to, when I'm talking about the Meiji Restoration, I say this person went from here to there. It seems like they got there. but they probably walked, and it probably took them 2, 3, 4 days, or maybe a week. So there was that. I'd say there's a certain spirituality. I'd say, at least for me, some temples just had an aura and a spirituality about them, and others
Not.
were, I'd say it would be similar to, and not trying to say this in any disparaging way, some European cathedrals are, there's a presence to them, whereas a strip mall church might not quite have that same.
Yeah.
It has the spirit of God in it, but it doesn't have that quite the same. Damn, this is.
Yeah.
You could feel it as you're walking for it. And it's up to each pilgrim can do what they want. Because I did the bus tour first, bus tours tend to read a whole liturgy of prayers for it. So that's how I did it. I found very few other walking pilgrims who read as much of the prayers as I did, because they tended to be like, say it and get going. And I tended to say it quite long. And then you have to offer the incense, offer the candle at each place. Some places, there are few, I can't remember the name of it. There's one up on the hill that overlooks the ocean, but it is so windy. It is like next to impossible to get your candle or incense lit. And then as soon as you light it, they all blow out, because it's just, it's not possible. Well, we've come to an end. I just want to thank you, John. I highly recommend the book.
Thank you for moderating, because a lot of people ask me questions I really don't know the answers to, because I'm just a photographer and I need to pay attention to some of the details, but I don't, I've lived in Japan a long time, but I don't know that much about Japanese history. So it's really good to have you around to answer things that I don't know so well about.
I think it also takes a lifetime to learn, because like on my bus tour, the guide who had been on it 150 times,
Really?
like every so often would point something out to me, because she knew I was a history geek. But like I would never, oh, this little basin here, this water basin is blah, 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 blah. And I would have never, because it's not in the guidebook. It's not in anything else. And I wouldn't know what it actually is.